Yo, everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics, brought to you by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is the co-owner of the Eisner-winning comic shops. That's right, shops, I said. Challengers Comics and Conversation in Chicago. It's Patrick Brower. Patrick, how's it going?
David, thanks for having me. And I also want to add one more thing to my CV. I am a subscriber to your wonderful site.
Oh, thank you so much. See, I always really appreciate having you on as a guest for a number of reasons. This is, I think, the 5th straight year we've done this. And it always makes me feel really nice because you always say really nice things. And I'm a very, very vain person. Thank you so much, Patrick. You're so nice.
You're very welcome. I wouldn't just do it because we are business associates. Dare I say friends who have never actually met in real life. I do it because it is my favorite comics journalism site.
Well, thank you. Well, actually, I was going to ask, are you going to Comics Pro this year?
I am not, only because there's no time.
Right. 2 shops.
You mentioned the 2 shops, and I am at one of the shops every day of the week.
Oh my God.
I don't man a shop on Sundays. Sundays I go out to the suburbs and visit my parents. That I've been doing every Sunday for years. So that's like a built-in thing. As a matter of fact, last year I did not miss a Sunday in 2019. So I do that, but I also end up at one of the shops by the end of the day.
So today you worked? Which shop were you at today?
I was in Bucktown. We refer to our stores internally by their color schemes. So Bucktown is red, yes, and River North is blue. So I was at red today.
See, this is how I know you guys weren't 90s X-Men fans, because it would have been blue and gold if you had planned it out that way. But you already start with red, which kind of ruins it all. Yeah,
but it's like people have their own guesses as to what it is, or they say, hey, what's the third store going to be? And if you wanted to go with a color scheme, a primary color would be yellow. Yellow would be a terrible color for a store.
Right. Or
people think, oh, white, because you're such a big Captain America fan. No, this came from Superman Red and Superman Blue.
Oh, wait.
A different thing from the 90s that you were talking about.
So, would your next shop be Con L themed?
There's only 2. He was only red and blue. That's it.
Oh, wait, red and blue. What am I thinking of?
When Superman became
the electric Superman?
Energy. Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I forgot, because there was the 4 Supermen in what was it?
Yes.
What was that called? That was the Rise of the Supermen?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and then for some reason they cut it down to just Electric Superman, which was the real one, but then he was 2 Superman. That, honestly, sometimes when I start to think about 90s storylines, I really enjoy it. My brain starts melting a little bit.
You think, what was that? How did I like that? I don't even understand it now.
Why did anyone ever think any of the other Supermen in Rise of the Supermen was possibly Superman? I mean, one was literally a teenager.
Yeah. One was a robot. One was a teenager. One was in a suit of armor.
Right. And the other one looked exactly like Superman, except for he's made of electricity. I guess that doesn't make a lot of sense either, but at least it's closer. But let's talk about the new shop. You open the second shop. You got red and blue. You have one, the Bucktown store, and then you have the one that's on Franklin, which is River North. That's the new shop. It's really interesting because I wrote up I do my Friday column on Sketched, which is my 10 things column. It also goes up on my Patreon.
That's also one of my all-time favorite things that you do, and I look forward to it every Friday. And sometimes, because Dal and I usually record our podcast, Contest of Challengers, on Friday nights, and I usually look through it and go, oh man, am I going to just steal everything David wrote about? Not what you said, but your topics.
Right.
Or sometimes I was going to talk about this. I don't want to steal it. Then other times I'm like, oh, I need to know about this thing. We're definitely going to talk about it.
Sometimes I come up with some really silly stuff to talk about. I mean, this week, not silly, but I doubt you would talk about a random Kate Beaton comic that she posted on Twitter.
But I hadn't seen it, and that was great. And that made me laugh a lot.
It was a great one. I mean,
give me the baby.
It was so funny. But I mean, so when I wrote about you guys opening your second shop, this is not me trying to start a fatalistic tone or something like that. But when I posted about it, I was like, oh, I'm really happy for you guys. You told me about it beforehand and you didn't really kind of, paint a picture or anything like that. But I was excited for you guys. The second shop seems like an exciting thing. But then quickly somebody sent me a message after it went up and said, I actually listened to their podcast where they talked about it. And it wasn't for the reasons you might expect. So instead of me saying that, saying the reasoning for it, why did you and Dal decide to open a second shop?
It's funny. I always maintained from the beginning of Challengers, these almost 12 years ago, when people would say, "Oh, you're going to open it? Like, you want to change? You want another store?" And I always said, the exact second we can afford a second shop is the second we don't need one.
Right.
Well, that's still true. Basically, I mean, obviously, we love comics. We both grew up reading comics, and we want to spread the love of comics. But if we were making piles of money at Red, we would never think of opening a second store. We've been in this location and in this part of the city for 12 years, and we feel like we've kind of maxed out what this store can do. Like it's fine. The store does fine, but we want a store that does great, you know? And when it comes down to a matter of looking towards the future, we don't really have any set retirement plans. Like everything that I had as far as savings accounts and bonds and annuities and 401ks, all that got cashed out when we opened Red.
Mm-hmm.
And I figured, like, it's fine. It's temporary. I can build this stuff back up later. But later never happened. So we're looking at where we are. And it's not like Dal and I live in a gutter or anything. You know, we have comfortable livings. We're not wanting for food or shelter or, you know, the basics. But when it comes down to it, like, I'm not saving any money.
Right.
I'm not putting any money away. And I don't think I can with Red. So if
Red by itself.
Yes, exactly. So if we could do this again and have another Red, although blue,
right,
that would hopefully be enough to give us some sort of security in our futures. Dal is 10 years younger than I am, so he can fend for himself a lot longer than I have to. But I'm coming up to a point where I need to start thinking about the future and what happens down the road should I make it that far. And that's what blue is, really. Basically, blue is our retirement plan.
I have an alternate titling for your guys' shops. It's like one is today and the other one is tomorrow, because it's like one is like, because I mean that's the thing is like I think it's really easy the way it was conveyed to me, and this isn't me defaming the person who told me about it, is it kind of felt like, you know, it sounds like dark. It's like, oh, you know, we're not, you know, it doesn't give us a path to a good retirement, and, you know, you can't make enough money doing that way. But as you said, it's like one provides you enough for today to have a comfortable life. But what the thing is like eventually, Patrick, I imagine you would like to retire. And
or at least cut back my workload.
Or at least cut back your workload, exactly. And so like the second shop is more of like an investment in your and Dal's future, where you can't actually necessarily be working in a comic shop 7 days a week.
And in defense of whoever it was that told you, that particular episode did come off really dark. Like, we recorded it in the empty blue before, like the day we got the keys. So it was just an empty storefront, and like Dal was laying it all on the line, and I'm listening to it, going, "Do you want to talk like this? Like, is this what you really want?" Like I mean, you know, we don't necessarily go out of our way to hide things on our podcast, but I mean, like, you don't have to pull back the curtain that far,
right? But
he went with it, and then like that's the tone that he took in his answering of your questions as well. So yeah, they're right. It was. I mean, I'm like, man, this is dark as it was happening.
Do you guys have like a general tonal split, or is it just like, you know, situational?
I think it's like I'm definitely more gregarious and upbeat, but I also get angry at people faster. But like the things that really piss me off don't bother him at all. But tonally, he's a lot more low key and more, I guess, blunt as well.
So one thing I'm curious about Red and Blue is, I mean, I imagine Blue wasn't like a whim-based decision. You guys aren't like, you know what? Let's do it. And then the next day you guys have a shop. It involved planning. You're in, you know, the area, the shop is called River North. I know literally nothing about Chicago, but I know that there are, a decent amount of comic shops. How did you decide where to open, when to open, how to, like, what type of shop to make this? Like, it might just be literally like Challengers, but in a different place. I mean,
Right. Well,
what was the mechanics behind all this decision making?
Basically it was very similar to how we did Red. When we decided we were going to open a store, we pulled out a map, marked off where all the comic shops were, and then started visiting those areas to see what was available and what was served or underserved. And then it became a matter of, well, this one is too far away, this neighborhood is too expensive, and that's how we came up with Bucktown. But we want to stay near a train station, a major train hub, and bus lines and things like that. But here's the thing about Chicago as a city that's always confused me. If you look at the downtown area of any major city, like New York, like Los Angeles, not the city itself, but the downtown business district, the cultural hub, as it were, all major cities have multiple comic stores. For the last 20 plus years, downtown Chicago has only had one store ever. And like, you can't, how many stores are in downtown New York City? A bunch. So we wanted to get as close to downtown as we can afford. We're not actually in downtown, but we're a mile and a half away from the lake. And that's fairly close.
So is Bucktown more of like a neighborhood shop?
Yeah. I'm sorry. That was very loud. Sorry. Yes. There's a lot of homes and families in this neighborhood, and it's still, both of us, I was working downtown, Dow was working in the far suburbs. So this is more urban than he was used to, less urban than I was used to, but it is definitely built off of the neighborhoods and people in transit from work to home, because we're right by a major Blue Line stop, and the Blue Line is the train stop that gets you to the airport, to O'Hare Airport. So it's one of the train lines that never stops running night or day. So we wanted to keep something like that in mind, but we wanted to be more urban. We wanted to be more where there's more business people and people that work. We wanted to be more toward. We're near homes now. We wanted to be near businesses there.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, because I'll tell you what I do. Like, Anchorage is obviously a completely different market. There's one comic shop. And first thing I do after I get off work on Wednesday is I go to Bosco's Comics in Anchorage, Alaska. I buy my comics and then I go home. And I imagine that's probably, the expectation for what people in like the business district are probably going to do too, if they are like Wednesday comic people. But also, I mean, like, you want to fish where the fish are, and like, you're going to have high population density down there. So, it's only what, like a month? A month?
Yeah, like barely a month and a half. We opened the last Friday. We opened Black Friday.
So, it's tough. You can't really make any broad like assertions or decisions based off of performance so far, but how's it been going so far?
It is slower than we expected it to be. It is harder for people to find us. The interesting thing is that the store is basically the same size as Red, but without sidekicks.
Right.
But it's laid out the opposite way, where Red has a really long batch of windows on a main street. Blue only has windows at the very end. Like if it's a rectangle, it's at the short end.
Mm-hmm.
And
so it's kind of
only
narrow and long.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like Red is the same way, but with one of the long walls being windows, where here, in Blue, it's the short end where it's only 3 panels of windows, and here we have 12 panels that are much larger.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So it's just, yeah, I mean, I think the difficulty in trying to make assumptions off of performance after a month is that there's a whole lot, people have to get used to seeing you there. They have to figure out who you are. Word has to spread. I mean, I guess, like, how did you guys kind of project what, like, the first parts were going to, look like?
We just duplicated what we have here. Like Challengers Red, what it is now, is vastly different than what we imagined 12 years ago, but that's what we're used to. So we figured we would start out with a fairly similar blueprint of what we had and then see how it changes. But it's obviously way too early to figure out what's going to change.
Sure.
One of the weirdest things is that we don't see many families with kids. So it's like our one of the things we're known for here in Red, I keep forgetting to say where I am, is the sidekicks in our kids area and our younger readers section. And while we don't have a separate room, we do have a section in Blue, but and we have tables and action figures and coloring books for people to play with like we do here. But we don't really have kids yet.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it's such an interesting month to kind of launch in because it's like on one hand, it's like the busiest time shopping wise, but at the same time, I know in previous years that Challengers Red has had troubles during December because people kind of just ghost you and they disappear because, they're spending a ton of money elsewhere. And, and like this year was especially weird because you had December 18th, which had like 55 million comics released, including every X-Men comic ever made. And then December 26th, which was, New Comic Day was on a Thursday, you had like 5 comics total released. And so you have this, weird split in like how it's rolling out. Now I'm trying to think of the question I was going to ask, and I completely spaced it, Patrick. I'm a complete horrible.
Well, you were asking about the timing of opening, and I mean, you could argue for or against any month of the year to open.
Right.
I mean, I would say probably, hey, don't open in February, but I don't know. You got to open at some point. And to go back just a little bit, like we had been looking for like a year and a half casually at places. Ironically, one of the very first places we looked at was like 2 blocks from where we wound up opening. Mm-hmm. But we came really close to a whole different part of the city called Printers Row, which is just a 2-block area that is just a gorgeous, like you feel like you're in the suburbs when you're downtown Chicago. It was like being transported, and it was a bike shop that had after 10 years was like, we're moving away. We don't want to do this anymore. And the space was big, very tall, weirdly laid out, but in a like, oh, this could be fun to deal with way. But we started negotiating with the realtor while the bike shop was still there. Well, when the bike shop moved out, they destroyed the place.
What?
Like giant holes in the floor, broken, like literally toilets broken in half. Like a tremendous amount of extra work would have been needed. So we were in the middle of talking with contractors, and we had a lease in our hand that we hadn't signed, but we had a lease for that spot. And before our contractors could come back with even estimates on how much it was going to cost to fix, they wound up renting to somebody else, somebody who would take it as is and sign a 10-year lease.
Why would that bike shop do that? That is like completely wild.
No idea. I mean, they were fed up. They wanted out.
Apparently they hated that toilet.
Yeah, right.
That's wild.
And then like right across the street was a fun little burger place called Hacks, as opposed to Hawks. And like that was one like, oh, this is such a great place, and there's so many neat things around here. Like a month after we didn't get that spot, that burger place closed. Oh. They weren't doing any business. I'm like, oh man, maybe that was an omen.
Yeah,
but
totally.
Literally, like within a week of that falling through, like the broker we were using had said, I'd never heard of this before. I've never seen someone offer a lease and then like give it to somebody else. A week later, we were standing inside of what is now Blue.
That's wild.
So it came together really quickly. Before we were recording, I was telling you Lago, which is my favorite restaurant, bar, and place in the city of Chicago. We're a block away from them now. Blue is right around the corner, and that's not a coincidence.
I remembered what I was going to say. I was going to actually ask, do you have, I mean, when you rolled that out, so you have the new shop opening, do you kind of go all out and like try to have signings and do things like that? Or is that more, you want to have a soft opening, a window where you're just trying to figure things out before you start kind of trying to blow the doors off?
Well, a little bit of both. Our first official signing was Brian Crowley, who had a backup story in the Hackslash 15th anniversary comic that came out, but it was a matter of timing. That
Sure.
had come out like our second or third week, and coincidentally, I'm in that book as well. Not as a creator, but as me. Cassie Hack comes to life inside Challengers.
Nice.
So I'm in the book. So I'm like, yeah, this will be fun. And nobody came to it really. Like a handful of people showed up.
Sure.
But our first double signing, because what we want to do now is if we're getting a creator in, we want it to go to both stores. So the first person we had to do both stores was Daniel Warren Johnson.
Nice.
The day that Dead Earth, Wonder Woman Dead Earth came out.
Yeah, and he is a rather popular man these days.
Yeah, he definitely is. And it was our best day in blues so far still. But also it was, the 18th, the day that everything came out, and people were doing a lot of Christmas shopping then as well.
Yeah, I just imagine like so much of it is visibility and awareness and people figuring out that you're there. And so like that, having events that will bring people there amongst the comics community is probably pretty important. And now, a quick word from our sponsor. Yo, everybody. As a listener to Off Panel, I'm guessing you love to hear how your favorite stories come together. And on Netflix's Behind the Scenes podcast, that's what you get, an exclusive look at how its biggest series are made. The podcast is back with a new season, giving us an exclusive look at The Witcher. As you might know, The Witcher is a new Netflix original series starring Henry Cavill that's based on Andrew Sapkowski's best-selling books. If I'm being honest with you, they pretty much had me at Henry Cavill, but any show mixing A Tale of Destiny with mutant monster hunters has me fully on board. The Behind the Scenes podcast will tell listeners how they turned nearly 3,000 pages of original material into this Netflix series. Host Brandon Jenkins talks with everyone from executive producers and writers to the cast and even sword masters who worked on the show. And if you're excited for The Witcher, this podcast is your ticket to an even better experience. The Witcher season of Behind the Scenes is out now, with new episodes dropping weekly. Subscribe now by searching for Behind the Scenes The Witcher in your preferred app. And now, back to the show. Let's start talking about kind of this year in a way. I'm currently doing a check-in with retailers where I'm talking to shops about the year that was, how it was, and everything like that. And it's every year is kind of like this, but it feels even more like it was like a year of sections, where the first half was pretty weird, and then Hoxpox, House of X, Powers of 10 came out, and it was like, God has blessed the world with its Hickmanness, right. and then like the last part of the year was a little weird again, and I just generally feel like I've been writing about comics for 10 years now, almost 11, and it's a particularly weird time, and I wanted to get your opinion. How do you feel 2020? This is January 2020. How it compares to previous times since you launched Challengers in 2008, because 2008 was a weird time too. It really took until the New 52 kicked off until it was kind of like this new spike of interest, and then it's kind of tapered off a little bit since then. How is it? Does it feel particularly weird, or is it just kind of it's comics and that's just how it is?
Well, unfortunately, the weird part is now the norm. Like, it always feels weird, but for different reasons. So you expect to feel weird about things. When we opened in 2008, things were a lot more steady as far as books being around longer.
Sure.
And now there's no, ironically, DC is changing numbering of books to go back to their legacy numbering, but there are no books that really make double digits without significant drop-offs, and there's really no way to keep people on board because there's always something new to look at. We're going into 2020, and I don't feel that much different than 2019, although I think there was a level of optimism that I had for 2019. I remember specifically our conversation from a year ago and the things I was looking forward to. And now I just expect 2020 to be more of the same,
right?
But same that I think I can handle, like I can navigate. But also part of me thinks that by this conversation next year, somehow things will be dramatically different.
Right.
And I don't necessarily mean bad, but I don't necessarily mean good. I think that there's a change on the horizon, but I don't know really what form it's going to take. There's a lot you can speculate in any direction.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not worried about the life of comics. There will always be comics. There will always be comic shops. You know how record stores are in vogue again.
Right.
I don't want comic stores to not ever be in vogue, but I'm not worried about comics as a medium and as a form of expression and entertainment. I'm just worried about the ability of stores to exist that rely on selling them weekly.
Yeah.
It's such a different beast now.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's really kind of struck me when I'm going through the responses from retailers, and just kind of like, I even talked about this with Matthew Rosenberg when he came on the podcast about from a creative side. But one of the things that kind of seems like it's standing out is that the things that are succeeded in 2019 are kind of the antithesis of what you would previously have expected to succeed. Like in 2008, if I told you, hey, all of the most successful books are miniseries, you would probably think I'm crazy.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Like what? Like no one wants to buy miniseries.
Yeah, exactly. And now, like the biggest things last year for comics, in near as I can tell, are House of X, Powers of 10, the Black Label books. Doomsday Clock, astonishingly. I mean, it took like 57 years to come out. I mean, it's not astonishing. It's Gary Frank and Jeff Johns telling a Watchmen versus Justice League book. I didn't read it, so that's my takeaway.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like, it sold really well for us. I can't find anyone who says they liked it.
Right. Well, I mean,
but they still bought it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the funny thing though, is like, I don't know, which would you prefer? Like, you know, the audience who is like advocating for it like crazy, or the one that buys it. It's kind of like it's always a weird split. But I mean, that's one of the things that really shocks me though. And I kind of wonder how much. I mentioned, you know, you opened in 2008. 2011 was when New 52 was. I wrote about this for my decade in review column, where I talked about the 5 moments that changed that impacted comics the most in the 2010s. And the New 52 was this massive boon in a lot of ways, but it also had a cost. It triggered Marvel relaunching 7 times in like 7 years, I think it was, and then DC doing New 52, and then they did DCU, which was kind of a half measure, and then they did Rebirth, which was a full measure, and God only knows what 5G is going to be. I mean, these things have trained readers or consumers to behave differently, and I kind of wonder if that's part of the reason why miniseries have become as successful as they are, is because readers, comic consumers look at the medium differently now because of the way it's operated, or if it's just a product thing. I don't know. I mean, it's easier to sell a miniseries when it's Jonathan Hickman relaunching the X-Men.
Oh, for sure. But also it seems that there's a lot of people who don't want the financial commitment of an ongoing series. And I always assume that people don't want to commit to anything long-term because they know how much new stuff is coming down the horizon. And we're guilty of it as well. In our weekly emails to customers, we're always hyping the new books, the new number ones. And when there aren't new number one, like this week, for this upcoming week, it's like, oh, Iron Man 2020 is like the big one, number one, but it's not a big number one. And our Iron Man sales are anemic, and we don't really have anything we don't have any movement on that book. So I took this week specifically to be like, hey, here's all the books that I'm going to be getting, and here's why I like them.
I like that.
And they were all just, like regular series that are going on. None of them were first issues.
Well, and that's an interesting thing, because I think of Challengers first. It's funny. We've talked about this before, but the first comic I think of when I think of Challengers is The Sixth Gun. And it's because it was such a big success for you guys when I'm not trying to cast aspersions about that book because I love it, but it wasn't as big of a success around the rest of the country. And I think it was because you guys believed in it a lot, and also they're local-ish creators, local?
St. Louis.
Yeah. I mean, they're in the vicinity. I think they did a signing. And so, I mean, I feel like, trying to just, it's kind of like when you're trying to sell all of the new product, everything kind of doesn't stand out anymore. But if you sell the stuff you're really passionate about, I feel like there's more value to that. At the same time, trying to get somebody to buy into, like for me, Kaiju Max season 5, number 2, that's not coming out this week. But if it was, I'd be like telling everyone they should buy it. and it's harder to sell somebody on something that's what 27 issues in. And so
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's tricky, but I do like that angle a little bit more.
But to your point, Kaiju Max is one of my favorite books being published, and man, with us pushing it for years, we maybe have 15 subscribers.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like, for as much as great as the Six Gun did for us, we've never been able to duplicate that with those creators, even though there's The Damned or Harrow County or currently, oh man, I forgot what else I was going to say.
The other book, God, what is the other book? The one that was like a spinoff of the Six Gun.
Yeah, Shadow Roads.
Yeah, that's it.
Like Shadow Roads, my God, we're down to like two people in club for that, and it's in the world of the Six Gun, and it's in the books. The Damned is just as good. Tales of Harrow County, even though there's only one issue so far, it's just as captivating as the original go round, but people just don't care anymore.
Right.
And like, A, the people that were reading Harrow County, we can't get to be on this, and B, we can't get new people. And I don't understand it because the books are good.
Right.
And it's like, I often feel that we've lost our touch, like we've lost our ability to sell books. But then every once in a while, something like Little Bird comes out where it's a huge hit for us, but it's also a huge hit around the world. You know, it's not like a Challenger's grown thing. We did a fun sales battle with All Star Comics in Melbourne, Australia for that book, where we each ordered the same number of copies, and we'll see who could sell more, kind of thing. And it was almost a dead heat. We beat them by like 2 issues.
In your face, All Star Comics.
Yeah, I know, right? That's what you get. That's what you get. But then, like, we did it because Mitchell Davies from All Star and I talk about retail all the time. And it was a book we got a preview for, and we both read it. And I had said, "Hey, did you read this? It's so great." He's like, "Yeah, I like it a lot." But I'm like, I feel like this is maximum. Like, we'll start at 30 copies and we're down by 12 by the time the series is over. That's the way a lot of Image series go. And 30, by the way, of a current Image #1 is a huge number for us.
It's a monster.
Now. Yeah. We did 50 copies of Undiscovered Country and #1, and we still have copies.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a book that people rave about and love. But so All Star and we picked, and Image made it returnable, so it was easy to pick a ridiculously high number, and then we both sold out.
Yeah,
and that's great. But like some of it, very little bit of it was, I'm like, we want you guys to win. But then we also had people like, "Hey, can I call All Star and buy it from them so they get my money?" Like, joke things like that, which fine. But like, the chances of us, like, until Saga comes back, there is no Image comic we're ordering over 100 copies of.
Right.
And Little Bird was that book.
It was a really good book.
Yeah, and it was, and so it was easier to sell. But it's so hard to do stuff like that. And we gotta, at the same time, I was promoting Little Bird, Invisible Kingdom, and Assassin Nation.
Right.
Those were 3 new #1s, 3 completely different kinds of books that I thought each of these was a strong #1 we got to read in advance. I'm going to push them. And Little Bird was far and away the winner. Assassin Nation started strong and held on okay. And Invisible Kingdom started low and then died.
Right.
Even the people that tried it, most of them have dropped that series now.
I feel like, I mean, that's those 3 books are like kind of an interesting microcosm of comics, because it's like I like Christian Ward's art a lot. I literally have Christian Ward's art up on my wall, but there's something more visceral and accessible about like an Ian Bertram than there is about like, Christian Ward book. And it's interesting how there's like that divide there. Like, that's one of the things that I think is interesting about Little Bird's success, or even if you look at House of X and you look at Powers of 10, or you even talk about the Black Label books, the only commonality between those books and their success is that they were doing something significantly different than what we'd seen before.
Yeah.
And like, the thing about Little Bird that I really appreciated is it had great, like, it wasn't just a good comic, it had great production value. Like, there was a lot of put behind it, and like the fact that they actually have like a designer on the cover. I'm not saying that like, you know, designers are the new rock stars besides Tom Muller because he's the man.
He's a rock star.
He is a total rock star. But I do think that in a market where there's so many comics and there's so many similar comics, I mean, I'm pretty sure Dal made a comment about post-apocalyptic books in his write-up to me, and I don't remember exactly the nature of it, but there's a saturation there. So it really matters to stand out today. It always does. But I feel like it matters even more in a market where the saturation point is so high.
Yeah.
So, you know, Dal's already given me his write-up, so I'm going to do spoiler alert, but, you know, 2019 was roughly flat for Challengers.
Yeah, so we say roughly flat if we're within $5,000 either direction.
What is that percentage-wise?
Like 2%.
Oh, okay. But, I mean, granted, well, I'm reading Dal's write-up, but does flat feel like... Does it feel like a success or
no?
Doesn't feel like a success?
Here's the way I'm gonna phrase it. When I started like listing sales stats on Twitter, one of the things I'd said was 2019 felt like the hardest year I've ever had trying to sell comics. It's harder and harder to get people to take a risk on a book, to buy a book because it's good, to buy a book because you want to read it, to not try to collect it. It was such a struggle, and like more often than not, I felt like I'm not doing anymore. But we say flat, we were up. This was our best year ever.
Really?
Yeah, by 1.3%.
Yeah.
And that 1.3% is better. In the 2016 was our best year ever.
Right.
So 2017 obviously down huge. 2018 back up, but we were up 1.3% from last year, but that in that 1.3% is where 2016 fell as well. So best year ever, did not feel like it at all.
Okay, so this I mean, obviously if you could crystallize that, you would say it on Twitter already, but do you have a sense for why that was? Is it just because it was such a slog to kind of get there?
Yeah, because the first half of the year was pretty terrible.
Yeah.
And like there were, I think Dal describes them as catastrophic April and June. April and June were down thousands upon thousands of dollars from the year before. So for us to be up 1.3% at the end of the year, that means the rest of the year was a phenomenal climb from like the hole they dug was those 2 months. The hole they dug was so deep, and I'm not saying those were only 2 down months. Those months were down considerably.
Yeah, there's down and then there's down.
Yeah. So there were other months that were down, but then it just took everything else for the rest of the year to get it back up. And we always look at like, okay, did we have a huge event? Like a couple years ago, we had the Rickmobile here, but that wasn't last year, so that wasn't part of it. Did we have like some crazy creator signing that we don't remember? Like, were there 5 Wednesdays in one of those months that made that month better, that kind of thing? And there's no specific reason why June and April of last year were bad. And it used to be September was always down. You could predict that. Like January was decent. Like March would be the first real down month of the year most of the time. Now everything's out the window, man. You can't compare anything to last. No, not at all. Because outputs don't mean anything. And I don't know how long you've been going to comic convention, but when I was a kid, we'd go to a convention, you'd go to the publisher presentation and they'd be like, hey, this is what we're doing for the next year. You go to a convention now and all you're getting is whatever the next previews is. Here's the things we're going to be doing. But by the same token, I was complaining to Dal just today. Like we had a club member turn in, a club member who gets a lot of variant covers, which I'm not a huge fan of that. But when somebody gives us information ahead of time, fine, we can order it. Also, they did want 4 copies of the 1 in 200 Guardians cover. So we're not getting that. No. We're not ordering 800 copies of that book. But there were several things on their list that I didn't even know what they were, and I had to look them up.
That happens with me so often, Patrick. You have no idea.
oh God, but like this is my job. I'm supposed to know this.
It's kind of my job too.
A Web of Venom. I'm sorry, not a Web of Venom series that I'm like, no, the next one is Fortunate Son, not Unleashed. Oh no, Unleashed comes out in June. That's not even going to be in a catalog till April. How do they even know about this?
I don't know.
Like I had to dig deep to find out what it was, and like covers that just got announced, like the Boss Logic cover for Captain Marvel 16 that just got announced this week. I didn't hear about the announcement. I hate that I have to go to news sites, not journalism sites, but comic news sites to find out about the things that I'm going to be selling.
Right.
And then I get lists from people like, hey, I want to order these. I'm like, you can't. It's not going to be in a catalog until April. Like, what I'm going to have to write this down somewhere and hope I don't lose that piece of paper.
Yeah.
Like, I can't do my job effectively because it doesn't exist as an item in the distributor catalog because they just announced it. But the publishers announce to the end user, not to their customer, because we're their customer. The end user is our customer, but why are they getting the information first?
Right.
And then when I was ranting about that, there was a club member who was in the store who said, "Now, like you're looking at it wrong. Like Marvel's customer is Disney." I'm like, no, but that's their parent company. No, Marvel does things so Disney is happy. Like they don't care about who's buying their books. They care about the press they get because Disney is not going to look at Diamond sales. Disney's going to look at Variety and say, oh, look, people are excited about this Marvel thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I mean, I just morsel of that is true. I hate it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of 50-50 on that. I mean, like I would like where there's smoke, there's fire in terms of publicity, but at the same time, if their sales were in the tank, it wouldn't really matter if they had like an article in Variety. But I don't know. I mean, it's so interesting. Like I was trying to think of options for you instead of just writing it down. I was like, oh, maybe Comic Hub, or maybe like if that Diamond pull list thing ever comes out.
That's been beta testing for 2 years now.
Yeah, it's just because they got to get it right, man. They got to really lock this thing down. But I mean, even if they had that, like they wouldn't even have it in previews yet, so it's not like you'd be able to order it. So even I don't know. I mean, I was actually kind of noodling on an idea for an article today about how. This week's podcast is going up before you is David Hyde, who does comics marketing. And
I got the email about that today.
Yeah, and I was thinking about like kind of the mechanics of marketing and how we're always promoting everything. Because, you think about the social media era and you think about how everything is about today. But then when you think about the distribution cycle, they're promoting during two periods. They're promoting when the book is announced, and then they're promoting during FOC. And so those two periods combined with social media means that the only attention is put upon it is before release. And so it's like there's this huge push, and then when it comes out, there's nothing. And
because they're pushing the next thing.
Right. Well, but then at that point, it's like almost comics are more about general ideas than they are about actual products or stories. And it's like a really like I don't have this thing totally formulated in my head, but it's like I find it to be a really fascinating idea. Well, let's talk about it. So, April and June were apocalypse months. We know that means that other months had to have been good. What did work?
What worked are the same things you're hearing from everybody. Obviously, Hawks and Pox brought a lot of people back in, and looking at our 100 top-selling single-issue comics charts for the year, the only reason that issues of Hawks and Pox didn't go as high as they could is because we couldn't get them.
Right.
After they were available and after the demand was so much higher than anyone expected. Honestly, I can't believe that Spawn 300 beat X-Men #1 in the sales charts.
Like the actual sell-through?
Yeah, I mean, just no, Diamond's top 100.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Not ours. It didn't. Spawn for us came in at number 19, where X-Men came in at number 2.
Yeah.
X-Men #1 came in at number 2. The things that worked were not only the Hawks and Pox, but the excitement that people had for everything coming after it. And it showed us that people care about these long-standing properties when somebody has a complete vision. And the fact that they were able to clear the board of every X book and then not invalidate anything, because at first it's like, wait, how are these Havoc just died, how is he here?
Right.
And then, but that's all explained, and it's great.
Gold balls.
Yeah, exactly. Fabio, he's helping everybody.
He solves all the problems.
But Dow postulates that he wants to see the same thing done with Avengers.
Yeah.
He's not wrong. Avengers, and I'm still a regular Avengers reader, but we are hemorrhaging readers on that book, and it's still Jason Aaron, and it's and McGinnis. Those are A-listers, but people just don't care.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like a fun book. Like, I enjoy that comic, but in a way, it also kind of feels like nothing, which is like a really weird thing to say. It's like it doesn't
Earth's
have
mightiest heroes. Yeah.
What's that?
Well, for them being Earth's mightiest heroes, it doesn't feel like it.
It feels like there's no inertia behind it, as opposed to, like, you read like the Dawn of X stuff, and even like the books that I'm not overly fond of, it feels to a certain degree like it's part of something. And the Avengers just feels like it's happening, if that makes sense.
Well, we were talking last night about the original Kree-Skrull War back from Avengers 89 to 97, and how it's a major story point in the history of the Marvel Comics universe, and it was 8 issues in a regular series.
Right.
Now it would have to be this giant summer event with 60 tie-in issues, and it still wouldn't feel like it was that big of a deal. But this felt like everything because it was happening in the Avengers book.
Was that because you guys were talking about Empire?
Yes, exactly.
It's the Kree and Skrull war instead of the Kree versus Skrull.
Right. I will jump in quickly and say I really enjoyed Incoming, even though it's taken a beating in most people's reviews. But I didn't care at all about the ending to it, and I don't really care about Empire.
Yeah.
And I like what you had said about it, how if this, like, it's got Al Ewing, it's got Dan Slott, and it's Valero Sheedy, and it could be good, but they're not going to let it be just what it is. They're going to War of Realms it.
Yeah, yeah. And which is funny because War of the Realms itself was actually really good too. And there was like a million tie-ins. I honestly
there were like 64 actual other books for that series.
Like, actually?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, and it was funny.
Once you, like, the actual series and all the tie-ins and crossovers, yes.
I know.
64 to 68. I can't remember the exact number.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it's... I sometimes wonder if, like, the net gains they get from all the peripheral books make it worth the potential cost on the main book. Because sometimes I wonder if the main book would become bigger if it didn't get weighted down by all the rest of it. Probably not. They have people at Marvel who crunch these numbers and figure things out. But yeah, I mean, so it seems like it's mostly kind of the usual stuff. But I mean, I am curious about the sidekick side of things. One of the things that I've been asking people is kind of how did Raina's book do this year, like Guts? And one of the things I've been not entirely surprised to find out is Guts is kind of the type of book people expect to find at other stores, like your Barnes and Nobles, your Targets, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like almost less of a direct market book. But are the kids' comics, is that side of the thing? Is it the graphic novels? Is that still performing pretty strongly for you?
Oh, yeah. First of all, Guts was our 21, it ranked at 21 in our top 100 graphic novels for the year list. It ranked it in 21st place, which is great, but it absolutely could have been higher. Like, Raina was such a big deal to us personally years ago, but it's exactly what you said. It's that you can get all of her books everywhere, like gas stations now, probably, and Subway when you're getting a sandwich. There's an end cap of Raina's books and Dogman books.
It's actually part of a value meal.
Yeah, exactly. Jeez, why not?
Yeah.
And Scholastic book fairs and things. And those books still do good for us. We have 3 Dogmans in our top 100, but we have 25 books from Sidekicks in our top 100. Mm-hmm. And Sidekicks is just young readers. It's not YA. It's like, 10 up to 10 or whatever, or all ages.
So like no pumpkin heads.
No pumpkin heads, correct. Like half of the, like a DC Zoom, not DC Ink.
Right.
Or do I have that backwards?
I was going to say, not that
remember.
that exists anymore, but
Yeah, exactly.
I honestly could never keep them straight anyways, because the names were kind of irrelevant to me. I think Zoom was the younger one.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's going back to one thing that you mentioned earlier, where you I wrote that you might have read my piece about like risk aversion in the direct market today, and like I've been asking people, retailers, about that, and one of the things that I haven't really thought about until we started talking about this is the consumer side of it. I kind of feel like maybe part of the reason why you mentioned earlier about how sometimes people will like buy a first issue and then it's like they know so much else is coming, so they won't keep it going. It's almost like it's a risk proposition for consumers too. It's like, can I risk that this comic will not be good past number one, or be great past number one, which means that the next number one might be more worth a purchase for me? And I don't know where that fits in. I mean, like that's one of the tough nuts to crack in the market today, right? Is like, why are customers buying what they're buying and not buying the next part? You know, I don't know what the answer to that is.
I don't either. That's a thing we wrestle with all the time. Even books that acknowledge that they like. But like one of the ways I was phrasing it last year was, there's a lot of really good books on the market right now. Unfortunately, you can only afford to buy the great books.
Right.
And if you look going back to December 18th, which was the biggest new release week I think we've ever had,
it was stupid.
The consumers are the same thing. Like they have a budget. They can only buy X amount of comics. And it's every time stores talk about having a budget for what they order for the store, I think that a budget is nigh impossible in the comics retail industry because of how things stack up, how they come out. Like you can't predict how much you're going to spend per week. And looking at our Diamond invoices, like we do a pretty standard dollar amount reorder for graphic novels, pre-existing product every week. Not counting that, our Diamond bills are like a roller coaster, up and down, up and down. Like you can't, this week is $3,000 higher than last week. Like what? How do you predict that? And then the consumers who aren't used to everything coming out at one time, or hey, this book you ordered is now 6 months late, but oh, here's that $50 graphic novel that you said you wanted, and then you forgot you wanted it. Now it's coming at the same time, and I know you can't afford it. We can't afford to float you.
Mm-hmm.
Like we've already had to pay for this. We need that money back.
Right.
Like we can't just let this sit on hold forever.
Yeah.
It is a balancing act, and I like there's so much coming out, and Dow and I argue about this because obviously I think, not obviously, but I think that there's too many books out, but he's like, well, you don't have to order them all. Like, yeah, but we don't know what our customers are going to want. And at the same time, we have more and more people who are asking for multiple covers of books. And I just want to say, why don't you, instead of getting all 4 covers or all 5 covers of Mercy #1, why don't you buy 4 other books? Just get 1 cover and then buy 4 other books. They weren't going to anyway. They're not getting 4 or 5 covers of a book because they really want to read that book.
They like the covers, or they're going to sell them,
or they collect them, or they think they're going to be worth money or whatever. Like I don't think it's a matter. Like we have legit people that say, "Hey, I saw the cover for the Batman '87, the B cover. Can I get that instead?" Fine, we'll do it for you. It's actually an annoying process to have to go in because the subscription for any given customer through Comic Suite is the A cover.
Right.
So when they say they want the B cover, you can't just switch it out because then you have to cancel their subscription for the month, but then reinstate it for the next month.
That's weird.
Yeah, because otherwise, like you can't. It becomes special orders. And a quick anecdote. We're big fans of Stu Colson and Comic Hub, and while we don't use it, he did come out to Chicago and he walked us through it, and we switched over for like a day. And it was so new in the Comic Hub process, that it wasn't ready for what it wasn't where it should have been, or where it was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And there were Stu is great when you say like, hey, can it do this? he'll be like, oh yeah, let's make it do that. But there were also things like it was based off of the way that he ran his store.
Right.
And he'd be like, well, why do you want it to do that? And all comic retailers are pretty set in their ways. Like, well, this is the way we've always done it. Well, do you want to try doing it this way? Maybe. So we switched back immediately, and right now we're having more problems with Comic Suite, and RMS is the program that we run at Red, but that doesn't exist anymore. So we had to run RMH, which is Retail Management Hero. Basically, Microsoft stopped doing the retail management system program. Somebody bought it and changed it. So now it's called RMH. It's Retail Management Hero. And they basically just shuffle the deck.
Mm-hmm.
It does all the same stuff, but it's not as intuitive.
Right.
And it's annoying to have to know these two different systems, but they're actually the same system.
Yeah.
So we're very close to switching back to Comic Hub, but not right now. Not when we're still trying to figure out how the second store goes.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Although I it's funny. I am like I am not paid by Comic Hub in any way, but I am like a weird advocate for them. I find Comic Hub to be really like fascinating because it seems like it's genuinely useful for everyone, which is a shocking rarity in comics. And I don't know. I mean, at the same time, it's like I think something that some people wouldn't think about. Not that a lot of people are actively thinking about Comic Hub besides retailers and David Harper. But the thing is like trying to switch systems when you're under the constant push of like the weekly comic release like setup.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a lot.
It's difficult.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like you can just be like, oh, I'm going to shut down the store for a week or something.
No, Stu and his team are real good at like transferring over your data, like getting your backup installed immediately, and it's as easy as it can be, but as you point out, it's a difficult process. And there's a lot of functionality that Comic Hub has that Diamond doesn't, but Diamond's pull box will have. So we're hoping that it'll do that, but we've also found ways to do a lot of things on our own.
Yeah,
like the excuse me, like the you're reading Jonathan Hickman's X-Men. Well, here's an email that tells you all about Decorum. Do you want to sign up for that? That kind of stuff. So we do that manually, but we still do it.
That book is going to rule. I'm very excited for it.
Hopefully.
Yeah, I know. And then like there's always like the comment of like, well, I can't wait to read 2 issues of it and then never see it again. And that's, a problem of itself. But, I did want to ask about...
what did you just say about Frontier?
Oh, poor Frontier.
I know. I still want that book to come out.
Yep, everybody does. But, one of the things I've been thinking about a lot lately is number 2s. It's like number 1 is the one that is like theoretically easy to sell. It's where everybody puts the weight behind in terms of publishers. It's like, oh, returnability for number 1 and, all these different covers, et cetera, et cetera. And then number 2 comes out and it just dies. And then like, talk about number 6. By the time you get to number 6, it's like your audience has cratered. Do you think is there something that can be done to help repair might be the wrong word, but build up the number 2s, the number 3s, the number 4s, both for shops and for consumers? Because I mean, it just seems like it's no way to grow if you're just going to only push number 1s.
Do you remember the example of Fair Lady from last year from Image?
I'm familiar with Fair Lady. I take it that was one of those examples.
Well, Fair Lady, it came out, and the whole point of Fair Lady is every issue was only $2 or $3.99, whatever standard price, like 40 pages of story content, standalone single issue stories that could be read in any order. You get a full story and a backup story as well. And issue number 1 sold out and had to go to a second print. Mm-hmm. It was canceled at issue 5.
Yeah.
They couldn't even make it to 6 issues.
Yeah.
And this is a book that sold out for the first issue, and it did everything that consumers say that they want. It's not mired in continuity. You get a full story. You're not worried about like being left out. If you miss issue 2, you can read issue 3 and be fine. So I don't know the answer that. I going back to your risk aversion, like there's risk on everybody's part, and for as much as retailers say we want returnability, that's not entirely fair for publishers because somebody has to eat that cost.
Right.
But if you make a lot of publishers went out of their way to make first issues returnable, whether with qualifiers or not. Some publishers are like bumping up their numbers, like, oh, it used to be 5, now it's 10 copies are returnable or whatever. I like that Aftershock does 10 copies. You order 10 copies, it's returnable. The variant covers are unlocked at 15. So, you have to order a little more. Don't worry, it's returnable.
You mean like you can't get variants until you order 15 at all?
Correct.
Interesting. Yeah. So it's order gating, but it's like, I don't know. That's an interesting angle. Yeah. I'm gonna go back really quick. It's funny. I actually, my initial response when you said that person was ordering 5 covers of Mercy was, "What is Mercy?" And I'm pretty sure that's the Mirka Andolfo book.
Yes, that is. Yeah. Sorry.
It has like an art germ cover.
I'm bad at pronouncing Mirka Andolfo, so I didn't say that.
I think you nailed it, although that might just be based off of my own pronunciation of it, which might be wrong. So
I literally just parroted what you said. Yes.
Nice. Well,
I waited for you to say it, David.
I wrote about this in the 10 Things column this week, and I find Firepower to be a very interesting book for coming in 2020. Not just because it's, Chris Somney and Matt Wilson and Robert Kirkman, but because they're like, Kirkman's doing his weird mad scientist stuff where he's releasing a first trade for $9.99 the week before Free Comic Book Day, which on Free Comic Book Day, the real #1 will come out and it'll be free. And I find that to be, like in my mind, if that book's #2 issue can't succeed, #2s can't succeed, period.
No, you're right. I appreciate all the inventive ways that Robert Kirkman has taken to do things this past year. However, Die shot itself in the foot from the get-go because the way it went into Diamond's system, it wasn't ever on FOC. It wasn't on initial order until issue 5. Literally, a customer came in the day that 3 came out and said, "Didn't you get number 3?" I'm like, "No, that didn't come out." "Oh, no, it did. We didn't order it because we missed it because it wasn't on FOC. It was like the first 2 issues were matched to orders of existing books, but it never made it to initial orders. So we looked in the system like we didn't order 3, 4, or 5.
Whoa.
We missed all of them." And then we talked about it on the podcast, and we heard from several retailers who were in the same boat.
Yeah. Yeah. Because did you just get accustomed to how it was rolling out before?
Well, no. I mean, it's because there's so much on the market, you don't think you have to go looking for a book. Like when DC will do like, "Oh, we're doing a second print. We have to put the orders in now. It's not going to be on FOC." That's extra work for us to stop what we're doing and go look that issue up and then put the orders in through Diamond System.
Right.
Because we delegate responsibility. I do initial in red. Dal does them in blue. I do FOCs for blue. He does FOCs for red. So we're like, all right, we're covering all our bases. You're not. Well, and I do. We both do new to order stuff, which is every day of the weekdays. Diamond will say, "Here's all this new stuff that we're just coming out that'll eventually get into the catalog." It's mainly for toys and statues and stuff, or pop vinyls and things. But even if you miss a new to order book item, it'll be in the catalog eventually. In fact, they ship it in waves. So if you order pop vinyls that way, by the time they come in the catalog, you might already have them on your shelf, and you're like, "Oh, I can reorder this way." It's a nice, fun way to do it. Although, I don't know if you heard about the David Bowie graphic novel that came out this week.
I did. Mike Allred.
Yes, of course. But it was offered on new to order, and then it was in the catalog. Huh? But for whatever, that's the way that things work now, because it was a lesser known publisher, so it was listed in the new to order site of the website. So we ordered a couple copies through that, and then by the time it made it in the catalog, we had a bunch of subscribers say, "Hey, I want this book." Like, okay, so we ordered those through the initial order. So there's actually 3 ways to order things now: new to order, initial order, final order cutoff, and I guess reorder if you count that as a 4th. But for whatever reason, things ship in that order. So we got the new to order copies in this week, but not the initial order. Fine, it's coming later. But for whatever reason, Diamond zeroed out everybody's initial orders.
Sure,
So
why not?
nobody is getting, like, there's no record of us being able to get more. And we have more subscribers that asked for it than we ordered at first. And we do the new to orders as a way to be like, oh, this is a way to remind us that a thing is coming out. Or and a lot of stores don't do that. And there's still, I'm starting to ramble, but there's still too many stores that don't even do final order cutoffs.
Do you?
Which is
I talked about that with David Hyde. I mean, it is really fascinating that happens. But did you read Scott Pilgrim?
Yeah, loved it.
You remember that part where Scott finds out that Ramona had a girlfriend, and like it's like 5 straight panels, and his head like cracks open, and it's a bird. That was basically what just happened to me when I was listening to you there, because I'm like, what the hell? No, not it's not your fault. Did you invent the system?
No, I mean, new to order is actually fun and exciting each day, because like, oh, what is new thing we're just finding out about? What, like, unfortunately this week there were, and it could be like 2 items, it could be 200 items on any given day. Twice in the last month there have been Funko drops where it's just the Funko logo and Ghostbusters Afterlife 1, Ghostbusters Afterlife 2. So you don't know what it is, you just know it's a pop vinyl from that movie.
Right.
And
it could be like, Slimer, it could be some random kid or something.
Right. They just did 200 pop offerings with no pictures.
Nice.
And
God.
it's like, no, fuck you guys. I'm not ordering any of these. You're not giving me a picture. I mean, I know they're pop vinyls. I know what they're going to look like. No, you can't show me this.
I mean, you just, if you don't even know who the character is, I mean, that's a high risk maneuver. I don't know. I mean, like that's the thing that I think people forget about when it comes to comic shops. It's like I can go in and I can get mad because I couldn't get, was it The Rise of Kylo Ren? Was that
yes?
Yeah, like
yes.
I couldn't get The Rise of Kylo Ren #2, and I could yell at him for that, or something, yell at my shop for that, or something like that. But the thing is like, it's, I hate to say it, but it's really hard. I mean, if you order really, I think a retailer kind of phrased it to me like this when I asked about like the high risk stuff. They said something along the lines of, I order to not basically take a bath on what I'm ordering. It's like you're trying to not like fail. And like it's a dark way to put it, but it's kind of accurate.
Well, on the one hand, you don't want to get stuck with anything, but on the other hand, you don't want to limit your growth.
Right.
Like,
that's why I like what Boom's been doing. Boom's been handling stuff pretty interestingly.
Yeah, and Boom is like, okay, Boom is a good example of all across the board of what we've been talking about, because books like Once and Future and Something's Killing the Children and Folklords and Red Mother, those ones we're going to focus on because those are like original Boom properties that they did new initiatives behind and they pushed. And all of them, are good.
Folklords is super dope.
Yeah, they're all 4 of those books I'm a fan of.
Yeah.
Red Mother is the one I don't know what's happening, but I'm still intrigued enough, and the art is good.
That's Jimmy Olsen for me. No idea what's happening.
Yeah, exactly. But super fun to read.
Yeah, it's super fun to read.
Plus Steve Lieber kills that book.
Yeah,
oh my
totally.
God, he's so good. David, this is a quick side note, but I love the fact that the majority of guests you have on Off Panel are people that either have signed at Challengers or we have a professional relationship with or we work with. I mean, I love it. I love hearing these people go, Steve Lieber, yeah, he was here.
Yeah, I actually
so great.
I've studied your list. That's just how I book people now. Actually, I think it's just because secretly we have the exact same taste in comics.
I think so. I mean, you had Rose O'Connell, and I have emails to her back from like January of 2017 being like, hey, we're doing a thing. We want you to come and sign at our store. You know, and it took till now for us to work with her. But I like to be able to say, no, I didn't even know what Laura Dean was when we were asking her to do stuff.
I should say really quick, you said Rosemary Valero O'Connell. You broke up just for a second. Her, like right in the middle of her name. So it was like
sorry.
O'Connell. But okay, so
going back to Boom.
Yeah.
Something is Killing the Children. Love it. Once in Future, great. We're stuck with most of issues 2 beyond of Once in Future. Not stuck because Boom had returnability for that series, but
they're not moving.
The hype for those books was amazing because of the wrong reasons.
Right.
whether it be the Key Collector app or
Right.
people wanting to get on a thing that's going to be a movie, people aren't buying them because they're good, and that's why you should buy them.
Right.
And our numbers are falling, not plummeting, but they're falling on all those. Except honestly, we had a hard time with Folklore's ever taken off.
Yeah,
which is too bad because it's a really good book. But like again, all those books, but it's the number two thing, but worse because it's not even as if people tried them and didn't like them. They were buying them erroneously from the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, and I've written about that. It's like if that's the tricky thing about the speculation stuff and in all of your Key Collector app stuff and things of that sort. And it's if those are the hot books because Boom's print runs are just no offense to Boom, real weird for once in future, and like they go to like second print in like a quarter of a second, and by the time the first issue even is released, they're on like sixth print or something like that.
Yeah,
that is basically kindling for the speculation fire. If all the people who buy the comic aren't people who are going to buy number two, there's nobody buying number two.
Right. And that's not Boom's fault. They don't know that.
Right.
They don't know that people aren't going to come back for it. They're like, oh my God, people want to read this book. We got to make it accessible to them. And I applaud them for that.
So, okay, let's back it up to the beginning of number two. What's your thoughts initially? Obviously I don't even think it's on the order yet, on Firepower. Like, do you think that has a shot to make a dent? Do you think that is, what do you think of that plan?
So if you look at Kirkman's most recent books, Oblivion Song, Die, 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 even Outcast.
Not doing it?
No. Oblivion Song and Outcast were club only on. Die, Die, Die were maybe like 2 for the shelf.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be honest, I fell off of both Outcast, Oblivion Song, but I read Die, Die, Die all the way through. I had a lot of fun with it. It didn't connect. And I think it didn't connect because people didn't have a chance to fall for the hype because there wasn't any hype. It just came out.
Right.
The idea of a secret drop is a thing that Dal and I had talked about years ago. Like, can you Beyonce a comic book?
Yeah.
You can. Turns out you shouldn't.
I think it seems like one of those things that people talk about all the time in secret, and everyone has this idea, but it just doesn't really work in actuality. But yeah. I mean, I think the thing about that's one of the things I appreciate about Kirkman is he's always in his like laboratory trying to figure out ways to like, no offense to my guy Mark Miller, but like his laboratory feels like he's kind of gaming the system a bit. Kirkman feels like his laboratory is trying to find real answers. And I think, like I said, I mean, Firepower is going to be such a fascinating test case because if number 2 doesn't work on that with that A-list team and with like the build into that, it's going to be, I mean, I don't know, like that to me is like vaguely meaningful and almost like kind of condemns like where number 2s are right now. And of course, there's the tricky part of the fact if you start a book with a trade, you're kind of telling people wait for trade. So it's a really interesting book. I don't know. I always have my like
I like
curiosities.
The idea of the trade being, if you want to know how, like more, you can read that. But if you want to start the story, start here. And I feel that there's a bigger divide between the trade audience and the single issue audience than ever before. And there's the people like yourself. There's books you buy in trade, and there's book you buy in singles. Mm-hmm. You're not buying the singles and then buying the trade. But like, would you? All right. So are you going to get the Firepower Prelude graphic novel?
Yeah.
So are you going to get the single issues?
Probably, yeah.
Or will you trade wait?
Well, I mean,
you already have it as a trade to ask your own question to you.
Yeah, no, I'm not. I mean, here's the interesting. I'm like I always have to say caveats like I am not a normal comic buyer. I am very weird. And like, for example, here's a perfect example. I am still not done with Giant Days. I love Giant Days, but the trades are like a million years behind the single issues.
Yeah, the 12 is just coming up now, right?
Yeah.
You know what? I just 12 before our conversation. So yes.
UFOC number 12? Or volume 12? Yeah. I mean,
12.
The thing is like, if that was like doing the image model where it was like, having a break in between where they'd release the trade and then single issues, I would have been on single issues years ago, like a couple years ago. And it's interesting because like I have no problem starting something in trade, and if I love it so much, I'm gonna jump into single issues. I've done that a number of times, and for Firepower, I think it's kind of interesting because it's like the first volume is inherently not necessary, but
Yeah.
it adds to it. It's an appetizer, and I love appetizers. So that's I don't know. It's a really interesting book for me. But I did want to ask just a few more questions.
Sure.
Do you want to see more experimentation from publishers? Because it seems to me there's like this kind of there's almost like a like a bifurcation point in comics retail right now where it's like everyone's battening down their hatches and focusing on what works. But the only way I feel like there can be real solutions found is if there's a little bit of experimentation to find out what other options there are. Do you like experimentation, or are you just kind of like, what the hell are you guys doing?
Well, I like experimentation that still keeps retailing as part of the plan. I'm not a huge fan of experimentation that removes us, but so long as there's a component for us, like TKO Studios, like people can buy direct from them, but so can we. And
Right.
we stock their graphic novels. I think, though, they have a harder time reaching people because they don't have that same cycle that we talked about before with the announcement, FOCs, and that kind of stuff, because their stuff is just out.
Right.
Like there was a wait between waves 1 and waves 2, and waves 2 with Sentient and I already forget the names, the Roxane Gay book.
Yeah. I have it next to me. Hold on.
Okay. I want to say
Pound for pound.
Jewel, some Pound for Pound. Okay, there you go.
And the Banks.
Banks was the other one I was trying to remember. Yeah, okay.
And Eve of Extinction? Yeah,
yes.
those are the three other ones. Sentient Rule.
Which
The other ones I
sounds
haven't
just
read
like
yet.
an X-Men book.
Yeah, totally
and
does.
you know what? Same, but it's Gabriel Hernandez Walta, and it's Jeff Lemire. So
Yeah, there you go.
yeah, exactly.
Well, and the
Weird
funny thing about
format 'cause they're
TKO
bigger.
is... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that it's like they're a little bit bigger, so they look different on a shelf. But I think people have a hard time getting excited because they're not in the normal news cycle or news channel, or it's not like, hey, they saw this in previews and then it's coming out in 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
Even I am like, I gotta wait for them to email me to tell me when their next releases are available so we can order them.
Yeah. Well, in like the way that time works today, it was, I don't know, like 10 months between the two waves dropping, but it felt like 50 years.
It felt like forever. I agree.
Yeah, I was just like, when is TK? Because I remember they had like Sentient on their site on day one is like coming soon.
Yep.
And like, that's the funny thing is like, I bet if you had it a month afterwards, Sentient sales would have been much higher. And it's just because like by the time Sentient actually came out, people were like, oh yeah, that comic, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we've got a huge Jeff Lemire fan at our stores. And when that came out, I put it aside for her. And when she came in, like 2 days after we got it, I'm like, hey, look at this. She said, yeah, I already got it from them.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That comic was awesome, though.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I just had to say it. I really like that comic.
Sure. But I feel like we left Boom hanging. Like they're trying to do everything right. And through no fault of their own, the books aren't, the longevity isn't there already for most of these titles. And like the stack that we have on the shelf of Red Mother #1, granted it's returnable, so that's okay for us, but they still had to take that hit in making it returnable. And here's a great example. This week, Doctor Who, the 12th Doctor, the 13th Doctor, season 2, #1 came out.
That's a mouthful.
We have one of the cover artists, Andrew Peepoy, lives in Chicago. He orders copies for himself from us. They did some changes without telling anybody. So like he ordered 25 copies of his cover for the first issue. Turns out he didn't do a cover on the first issue after all.
Oh my God.
So we got 25 copies of not his cover. Fine. It's returnable. It's not a big deal, but I'm like, you know what? We'll put them on the shelf. See what happens. 0. We've sold 0. This is an internationally known property that is on television right now. And here's a new #1 that ties into it. We sold 0 copies.
That's wild.
That's today's market. Like people, somebody came in looking for a Star Trek countdown book, and I'm like, you know what? We stopped selling Star Trek books years ago. We licensed properties don't work for us. I'm sure that's just us, but it's such a weird thing. Like everybody knows this thing, but nobody's buying it.
Yeah. I feel like I keep wanting to quote Chinatown with you and just be like, forget it, Patrick. It's Comic Town.
It's Comic Town.
It just makes sense. But I mean, I think that like I like that there's also some experimentation going on with like the retail side. Like I find the Comics Omnivore program to be really interesting. And I know that
the only thing I don't like is the mandatory discount.
The mandatory discount of $1. Yeah. So for listeners that might not know, Comics Omnivore, that's oh my God, I'm completely forgetting the name. It's a Coliseum of Comics. Phil Boyle.
Coliseum of Comics. Yep. Phil Boyle.
So it's like a everyone share the risk type thing where publishers work with them to feature a single comic, and that comic has to be 100% returnable. In exchange, I think there's like some sort of promotion element, and also it has to be $1 off cover price for the first
week.
Yeah. And so like I've heard like, Colin McMahon from Pittsburgh Comics told me that the first issue of Usagi Yojimbo Usagi Yojimbo was like, I think he sold 10 times as much as he'd ever sold on any comic from that series. And because of the Comics Omnivore, and he felt confident in ordering because of that system. It's an interesting one because the $1 discount, like that I imagine there's a lot of heartburn amongst retailers because of that. But it does.
I mean, that is a quarter of the cover price.
Yeah, and you're taking a huge hit because of it. But it's interesting because it's a long-term play in an industry that has its biggest problems built on anything even medium
term.
Yeah. Well, I want to close with asking you.
Wait, hold on. What do you know what their success has been with the number 2s in those series? How did Usagi number 2 go?
I should ask. I will ask.
We sold really well with Usagi number. Traditionally, we could sell 1 or 2 Usagis off the shelf. We ordered 10 copies, sold them all, and Usagi is doing okay. I think we're sold like 4 or 5. Which is still considerably higher than it was.
Right.
And we are not Comics Omnivore participants.
Yeah. I'll have to ask because that is an interesting, follow up on seeing how those things can carry on. But I mean, I always get this name wrong. Sometimes when a title is like 5 words long, it's like my brain like ceases to remember what the title is.
Not only that,
Something is Killing the Children.
Something is Killing the Children. Yeah.
That was a Comics Omnivore book too. And it was, I don't know. I mean, like that one's interesting too, because it's like, it was a success, but it sounds like it's not kind of carrying on. So I have a project. Thank you for Patrick.
But it's a really good book. It's a really good book.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's when it's the TV problem, there's so many good TV shows on, but I mean, how many people do you know, I don't know, watched, I'm trying to think of some unknown show. I don't know.
I'm a big fan of Stumptown.
Yeah,
I don't know how many people watch it.
Well, and here's a good example. We're talking about longevity. Silicon Valley finished this year.
Yeah.
And it was going for a long time. At the peak of its powers, it was I would say not a water cooler show, but it was something you could have conversations with people about. I don't think I saw one person even tweet about its finale, and it ended this year.
So. Okay, you actually brought up something that I wanted to mention on before. And as you know, our store's name is Challengers Comics and Conversation.
Right.
The conversation part is not harder, but I'm not finding people talking about the stuff they're buying. Maybe it's because they're talking about it online elsewhere. At the time that we started this store, it wasn't, as social media wasn't really that big of a thing.
Right.
But like, there's no chatter. That's how I like to phrase it at the store. There's no chatter. People don't come in and say, oh man, the books I bought last week, I love this, or whatever. It's focused on either, The Mandalorian or other pop culture elements or something that's coming out. But there's just no reveling in the glory. This is very hyperbolic, but no, there's no reveling in the glory of the book just consumed and digesting of it, because you're moving on. I had somebody in the store today from a different comic store, and he's like, hey, what's your favorite comfort comic book? Like your classic comfort book. And I said, I don't ever reread because I don't have time.
Right.
I want to. I have a graphic novel wall in my library at home filled with books I've bought and have never cracked.
Mm-hmm.
I bought them because I read them once and loved them. And now it's like I keep waiting to have time. And that time is filled up with everything that's still coming out.
Yeah.
But I lament the fact that there's no chatter about the books that are existing and that they're excited to get into, or that like nobody says, Green Lantern Black Stars, man, that's really doing it for me right now. You don't hear that.
It's fitting that oh, sorry, go ahead.
Just about anything for the most part.
It's fitting that you use that as an example, because I was going to say, I remember I bought Sinestro Core War, you remember the one-shot special that led into the whole thing?
Yeah.
I went back and bought that or I actually ended up buying it. I wasn't planning on buying it. I wasn't reading anything Green Lantern at that point, because like the hype was so towering. Everyone was like, oh my God, this comic is just outrageous. And I it was just so good. And I went back and bought it. And then I started buying Green Lantern and Green Lantern Core because of the conversation in the shop that week. And you're right. I mean, it's like House of X and Powers of 10, the conversation was towering online.
Yes, I'll give you that for sure.
Online. I mean, in my store, like there was a couple people talking about it, but it was like some of it was just kind of like, pointing, pushing your glasses up against your face, being like, I don't know what he's doing with these characters. This is weird. What's with the charts? And I'm like, calm down. They can be different. But I mean, it is interesting. There's like some people I still talk to about comics in the shop, but it's people I've been talking to for like literally like a decade. It's people like, there's this one guy in my shop. His name is Jordan. Jordan, I'm going to reveal something if you happen to listen to this, which you will not. I call him Skateboard Jesus because he kind of looks like a skateboarder who also looks like Jesus. And he's like, that's what my wife knows him as. And like, I talk to him about comic stuff all the time. Like I see him and we just talk about random stuff. Like he's huge into Beta Ray Bill and into the Sentry. And I hate the Sentry. The Sentry sucks. And so we talk about this stuff together. And it's funny though, because everyone else is like silent, It's like it's weird. It's like that part of the comic shop experience has kind of diminished, and I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's a product thing. I don't know if it's an internet thing or what it is.
There was a really talkative guy in today who wanted to talk about comics forever, but he was another retailer, so it's like a whole different type of thing.
Right.
Although I can tell you, when I'm at Blue, it does feel fresh, and I described it to my coworker Ashley that when I'm at Blue and I'm on. Like, this is all uncharted territory. I'm talking to people for the first time.
Yeah.
So it's like, A, I'm trying to win them over. B, I'm trying to tell them, like, show them how much I love comics in the passion of the store. Whereas most people in Red know that because they've been coming here for a while.
Right.
But it's a way to, like, A, prove myself, but B, try to get them excited at the same time. So it's almost like you're getting me dialed up a little bit because I'm really trying to, like, A, I'm trying to impress them, but B, there's so few people that come into the store that I'm just very happy to have someone to talk to.
It's like you're speed dating.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, okay, so this is a perfect place to finish. I wanted to, we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, and I always find it really interesting. I think I've mentioned this on the podcast before. Maybe I didn't, but my dad always like warned me about like not making your hobby your job because it could make you like something less. And I always like, I've always had kind of a mixed feeling about that because, I do my comic stuff and I still really enjoy it. And I think it's just like, maybe like I'm maybe a little bit different than my dad, but you talk about how you don't have time to reread comics. Like, do you feel that your relationship with comics has like fundamentally changed by being a retailer, or do you still feel like you really love comics? Like, are you in love with comics or do you just love comics?
See, here's the way that I can separate those two things, because reading comics is my hobby. Selling comics is my job. I am not reading comics for a living. And the things that I hate about comics are really the things I hate about comics retail and dealing with the general public. My love of comics, my interaction with comics hasn't changed. If anything, it's intensified because I truly believe there are better comics now being produced than ever before.
Yeah.
There's also worse comics than ever before too, but I just don't read those,
Right.
I mean, there's so many things to be excited about in the industry. And on the one hand, I'm a little bit disappointed that the cycles are so short that you don't have like Pumpkinheads underperformed for us because there's so many things that came out around it. It was hard for it to find its audience.
And that comic ruled.
It comic ruled. The book is great, and it's on our front table for people to find it. But at the same time, when we're also trying to pitch, 6 Tilly Walden graphic novels and Laura Dean and other things that fit in that same feeling, like you get the same feeling with a lot of those books, that like something like nothing, everything can't get the same spotlight. So I lament the fact there's no tail, and I mean like trail, not like an actual appendage.
Yeah.
For books like the books that people talk about for years and years and years, that it's only going to be a handful of stuff every year as opposed to as many as used to be, just because of the sheer deluge of product coming out. And like look at Faith Erin Hicks and Nameless City. The first one did great for us, and people still talk about it. But 2 and then 3 eventually they came out. People read them, but again, people aren't talking about them, and they're not. Just their legacy isn't as strong as they could be. But if you look at Amulet, Amulet Volume 1, which is so far there have been 8 of what will be a 9-volume series. Amulet Volume 1 came out like 11 years ago.
Mm-hmm. It
was our number 15 trade for the year.
Also rules.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like there's no other Amulet. There are 8. There's 7 other Amulets. None of them cracked our top 10. But 11 years later, we're still selling the shit out of that book.
Yeah, it's weird.
So like that is but the other ones just don't have it. And this is a whole different conversation about we talked about number 2s before, but like look at the hundreds of copies we sold of Six Gun Volume 1. Ask me how many we sold of Volume 9.
I don't think I want to, because that makes me sad.
Yeah, it's staggeringly different in the wrong way. But no, my involvement and my interaction with comics is it's greater than ever. When I started reading comics, I didn't have comic images tattooed all across my arms,
Right.
I didn't have the word comics across my knuckles.
You might have if you could have, but you were a child.
That's a good point. But I mean, I didn't think that they would mean that. Like comics are my life. Like yeah. I have other interests and hobbies and things, but it is my professional life, and it is how I'm known to people. Like, oh, I play in a heavy metal band called Serpent Crown. Obviously a comic book reference. Sure, but it's not like, oh, he's the guy from Serpent Crown. No, he's the guy that owns Challengers that also plays in a band.
Right.
It's things like that. Like, I've inked comics. I'm in comics. Comics are in my blood, and that won't change. Like, my brother is 6 years older than I am, and he's the world's biggest Spider-Man fan. His son's name is Parker. He doesn't like what is going on in Amazing Spider-Man, and he'll be like, "Oh God, I don't like this." I'm like, even when there've been runs of Captain America I didn't like, I'm still like, look, they're making Captain America comics every month, and if I had the time, I could go back and read the ones I loved even more. Like, that's not going to change. I don't want to be in a position where I'm like, oh, Spider-Man used to mean the world to me, but now I don't like it.
Right.
Like, no, you can always like the Spider-Man that you read. But that's a long-winded way of saying that I still love interacting with comics. The things that I'm furious about in the retail community are mainly having to deal with people. And if I may, David, I have a wonderful little segue that I just talked myself into. This just happened today, so it's very fresh. And I have a Yelp review. If you're okay, I'm going to read this.
Do it.
First, I need to well, I'm just going to read it. Headline: Rudest employee ever. Was in the area and went to Challengers just to look if there were any new comic titles that I may have missed to download digital versions of.
Oh, wait, is this blue or red? Doesn't matter.
Red. Doesn't matter.
Okay.
I assume it's red. This sloppy, fat, tattooed guy with a messy beard that looked like a bird's nest walks up to me and asks if I'm looking for something specific. I told him no, I'm just looking to see if there are any new titles out that I may have missed, putting on my list of comics titles to download off the internet. Then the dude goes off on me, telling me I shouldn't download pirate comics and that I should buy them, support the industry, blah, blah, blah. Sorry, with comic books going for $5 a book these days, I'm not going to spend money on something I can get off the web for free. If he didn't like that I wasn't buying anything, he should have kept his mouth shut. You don't go off on people like that. You talk about being totally unprofessional, all caps. With an employee like that, this comic book shop deserves to go belly up with the rest of the comic book shops dropping like flies.
Oh, my God.
So, first of all, he's obviously referencing me in that description.
Are you sure?
But, right. I can tell you this. This never happened.
What? Really?
Whenever somebody tells, like, somebody's like, oh, I'm just looking at, I pirate my books. I keep my mouth shut and walk away.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, they're not going to buy anything. I'm not going to change their mind. Whatever. Also, this dude, when we had Daniel Warren Johnson signing on the Facebook event page, this guy randomly popped up and said, oh, this book looks great. I can't wait to download it.
Jeez.
And so I hid that message. And then he kept
commenting with
like
that,
posting like, oh, man, comics are expensive. I just downloaded them for free. Then he started posting links to all these illegal download sites. And at no point did I interact with him. I just then blocked him from the page. And I never block people on Facebook because it's Facebook. Who cares?
Oh, so he's getting
but this
vendetta.
Dude was yeah, I obviously. But I mean, this never happened. And anybody who's ever talked to me about pirating comics, they know. But I'm going to read you now Dow's response, because Dow's like, oh my God, you're going to be so mad. Like, you won't believe this. You're going to go off on this guy. And he read it to me. And I'm like, I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care. But here's Dow's reply. It's pretty great. Wow. A lot to unpack here. A lot to unpack. First, just going to lead off with this. This never happened. We've heard from a few people over the years that they read books digitally, and some even tell us that they pirate a book or two. Do you know what we do when that happens? We walk away. We don't want to spend time yelling at strangers any more than strangers want to be yelled at. So yeah, this 100% never happened in our store. You've been posting to our Facebook page that you pirate comics. We get it. You've got an agenda. Why that agenda needs to include made-up stories and one-star Yelp reviews? I mean, it's just getting sad. Are you okay? It can't be fun feeling this way. Second, insulting and degrading someone on a Yelp review, way over the line. Completely inappropriate. If you want to lie, no, I'm going to skip that part. It doesn't matter. It's just like, hey, you should apologize.
Yeah.
But finally, let's talk about the monumental entitlement at the core of your story. Like I said, we let people pirating books roll off our backs when we hear about it in our store. But coming to our Yelp page, making something up, trashing our reputation, all to brag about pirating comics, this we can talk about. In your story, the proper thing to do when someone goes into a business specifically to scout out content they intended to illegally download at a later date is what exactly? Should you have been thanked for demanding both that artists worldwide work for free and that stores you despise act as showrooms for you to make your theft more efficient? How does that seem reasonable to you? Also, and this one really had my head spinning, how can you possibly say that someone suggesting you support a medium rather than stealing from it is more detrimental to this long-term survival of an industry than actively refusing to spend any money on art? If all the comic shops you hate so much disappeared, where would you even go to find out what comics to steal? How does this ecosystem work in your mind? Yeah, man, you want the artists in the comics industry to make high-quality work that you don't want to pay for. You want stores to applaud you for it. You want to post Facebook messages on retail businesses saying no one should pay for anything ever, and then you want to post fake stories and one-star reviews on Yelp when they block you. Yeah, that all definitely sounds like a reasonable way to approach things. This is all totally healthy and normal.
Amazing.
That is why I hate dealing with people in comics retail.
I guarantee you that guy has a YouTube channel.
Oh, I'm sure of it.
Yeah.
And like even in his condemnation, the first thing I do is come up and say, hey, did you need any help?
Yeah.
I mean, come on, guy.
Stupid person. Like, that is just like astonishing. That is amazing. But all right, Patrick, we're ending with the Yelp review. I will go and give you a 5-star Yelp review to make up for him. And I will make up a completely opposing fictional story because I've never been to your shop. But Patrick, thank you so much for talking comics with me, Challengers, Blue and Red, and everything else. I appreciate you taking the time.
David, it's always a pleasure to be on this. I'm a big fan of Off Panel. I listen to it when I'm unpacking the books every Tuesday, and I love what you do. And I am glad that comics have made us friends who have never met.
Maybe soon, maybe soon. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with Patrick Brower, the co-owner of Challengers Comics and Conversation. You can get more from Challengers on Twitter and Facebook, and if you're in the Chicago area, make sure to visit one or both of their shops. As a heads up, Off Panel is once again brought to you by Sketch.com. Check out the new version of the site and consider subscribing for access to all the site's content and its members-only forum. And if you're a fan of Off Panel, make sure to check it out on Patreon. If you back the show in there, you not only support it, but you get early access to each week's podcast, access to weekly content, and more. Also, don't forget to subscribe to Off Panel on iTunes or Spotify and give the show a rating or review while you're at it. You can find Off Panel and Sketched on social media by liking it on Facebook at /Sketched, that's SKTCHD. Follow it on Twitter at @SketchComic or following me at @SliceFriedGold. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Kenny Porter, Chris Pachala, Tora and Grumbeck, Fuzzbubbles, Christopher Todd, Transmitter Down, Harry Sayer, Walt's Comics and Books, Carl Mizell, Danny Ollie, Paul Slates, Litwin Studios, Akil Wilson, Nathan House, Alex Dimitriopoulos, Terry Dodson, Troy Jeffrey Allen, Liana Kingus, Keegan Ray, Milton Lawson, Wesley Giff, Sean Kirkham, Harry Small, Alistair Ross, Julio Anta, Brett A. Schmidt, Jason Goodmanson, Paul Ryanwan, Connor Farner, Vita Ayala, Aditya Bidikar, Tara Ferguson, Dave Slusher, WMQ Comics, Akil Kokachi, Phil White, Sean Pinello, Ken Heidelman, Philip Seavey, Al Ewing, Ryan Alcock, Nick Michelin, David Kelly, Rob Wilson IV, Nick Polito, Owen McCready, Brendan Fletcher, Gary Maloney, Jonathan Nilsson, Matthew Groom, Jason Assey, Adam Bogert, Xavier Files, Matthew Taylor, Tyler Turner, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Brawley, Ira James Udaskin, Modern Magic Stories, Nick Hall, Bjorn Basin, John Hendricks, Steve Anderson, Ian Maxfield, Cliff Chang, Benjamin Chipper, Colin McMahon, Chris Palmer, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fairbairn, Kat McKenzie, Greg Rucka, Adam Highfield, Fiona Staples, Chris Halloran, Mark Abnett, Mike Murphy, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim Debinakos, Norbert Nicolo, James Kaplan, and Mission Comics and Art in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. A quick thanks to Upright T-Rex Music, who wrote and performed Off Panel's theme song just for the show. Check out their music on Spotify because it's completely delightful. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.